After 5 maids failed, a hidden bond with the millionaire's autistic son was exposed. An amazing transformation unfolds. Jess stood at the window, the harsh light of the Chicago suburbs spilling into her modest home. Her heart raced, not from anxiety, but from the pressure of 5 failed maids staring back at her. Times were tough, and so was she. Every attempt to ease the burden of caring for Ethan, her brilliant but socially challenged son, fell flat. Each maid had left with tight smiles and the same unspoken message: some battles were better left unfought. Ethan sat on the floor, surrounded by an intricate array of colored blocks, lost in a world of perfect shapes and sounds. His laughter burst free like sunlight, pure and infectious, but the silence that followed felt heavy. Jess longed for connection, for her son to bond with someone who understood him. The glances from their wealthier neighbors were like daggers. They couldn't see the beauty in Ethan's mind, they only saw the difference. Late at night, as the moon cast a gentle glow, Jess found solace in her phone. The annual charity event was coming, and every fiber of her being pushed her to get involved. It wasn't just for her son, it was for all those children overlooked by a society fixated on wealth. But that meant she had to step beyond her comfort zone, which terrified her. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jess hesitated but picked up the phone to call Warren, the reclusive millionaire next door. His son, Derek, was like a ghost in the neighborhood, hidden from prying eyes, as if the walls of wealth could shield him from judgment. When she first knocked on his door, the tension between them was palpable, 2 worlds colliding. They argued about what it meant to raise a child like Ethan. Jess saw the longing in Warren's eyes, the same longing she felt. As the late-night planning sessions unfolded, she learned Derek was not so different from Ethan. Both boys needed understanding. Hesitant laughter erupted as the boys began to connect, a sense of togetherness blossoming among walls that had been built from unkind judgments. But the shadows of their neighbors loomed large. As the charity event neared, tension filled the air. Jess and Warren's partnership was tested when an incident at the event exposed the cruel prejudices of the community. Hearts raced and fists clenched. Would they stand together against the judgment? Jess's mission transcended acceptance for Ethan. It was now a fight for love, dignity, and the acceptance they had both yearned for. She glanced at Warren, their eyes locking in a moment of silent understanding. Everything hung in the balance. Would they find the strength to break down the barriers that separated them from acceptance? Jess took a deep breath, standing at the edge of the crowd, willing to confront the judgments with a pounding heart and a fierce resolve. What would she say? Would it be enough? And in that moment, she let a question linger in her mind: what does it truly mean to belong? Jess stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart thundering like a drum. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses faded into a distant hum as her gaze fixed on the stream of guests mingling near the entrance of the charity event. She clenched her fists, the fabric of her dress crumpling under the pressure. Each face, adorned with smiles, felt like a reminder of the world that often turned its back on families like hers. Warren stood beside her, his presence comforting yet tense. He was tall and imposing, but in this moment, both of them felt small. Jessie had always known that to expose their sons to the judgment of society was risky. But could they really hide away forever? Together, they had already faced so much: their sons' fears, the misunderstandings, and now, the challenges of this night. Are you ready? Warren's voice broke through her thoughts. His eyes searched hers, a mix of determination and uncertainty mirrored in his gaze. Ready as I'll ever be, she responded, though doubt churned in her stomach like a heavy weight. The 2 boys had formed an unexpected bond, laughter lingering in the air long after their game sessions ended, but would this friendship survive the harsh glare of the community? As Jess stepped forward, a sense of purpose surged through her. She spotted a group of neighbors, the usual chatterboxes who loved to dissect every element of her life. Their whispered judgments hung in the air like an unshakable mist. Ethan was on her mind, his smile, the way he lit up when he spoke about his favorite puzzles. Jess knew she'd never stop fighting for him. Not just because he was her son, but because he was worthy. And Derek, Warren's son, deserved the same chance to be appreciated for who he was. Deep breaths in, deep breaths out. She willed herself to move toward the podium, her feet heavy as she approached the microphone. Her heart skipped when she saw Derek by the punch table, nervously glancing at the crowd. He looked just as anxious, and she felt a rush of sympathy. They were all on the same path of discovery, navigating uncertain waters. Just as she gathered her strength to speak, a loud voice pierced through the murmurs. "What's that kid doing here?" Jess turned to see one of the wealthier ladies from the neighborhood, her tone drenched in condescension as she pointed dismissively at Ethan, who was playing quietly at the back of the crowd. Fueling Jess's anger was the realization that this was exactly what they had been fighting against. But instead of sinking into despair, a fire ignited within her. She stepped back from the podium and faced the crowd directly, every eye now trained on her, some filled with curiosity, others with disdain. The tide was turning. "You don't know him," she declared, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Ethan deserves to be here just as much as anyone else. He is not less than you. Not less than your children. He is beautifully unique, and so is Derek." Gasps echoed throughout the crowd. Jess pushed forward, words spilling out. "I want you all to look beyond your prejudices. My son is more than his diagnosis. There's brilliance in his laughter, a connection in his heart. If you can't see that, you're missing out on something incredible." Energy buzzed in the air, raw and electrifying. She felt eyes soften and heads nod in understanding, but there were still some hardened gazes. Warren joined her, standing tall, matching her strength. "This isn't just about our boys," he added, his presence lending her some much-needed courage. "It's about every child who deserves kindness and acceptance. One voice at a time, we can change this." As the murmurs began to quiet, Jess felt a flicker of hope ignite. Perhaps she was beginning to break through the walls of prejudice. But before she could breathe a sigh of relief, a troubling thought crept in. Would it be enough? Jess glanced back at Ethan, who was now staring wide-eyed at her with unfiltered admiration. She remembered his laughter and pointed enthusiasm for building with those colored blocks. Everything hung in the balance, and she wondered, would this be the moment that brought change or the moment that separated them further? Her heart raced again, knowing that the next steps could rewrite their story. Would they be accepted, or would the walls, once again, close in? The room fell silent, all eyes on Jess. She stood tall, heart pounding, not wanting to break the spell she had cast over the crowd. "Many of you think you know who we are," she began, her voice steadying, "but just as you see your own children reflected in your dreams, I see endless potential in mine." Glancing back at Warren, she noticed him nodding, sharing that spark of courage that had brought her to this moment. The scoffs and sneers were fading, replaced by frowns and furrowed brows. She could feel the weight of judgment shift ever so slightly. "At the heart of it all, we are just families trying to love our children," she continued. "Ethan has so much to offer. He has dreams and aspirations, passions that light up his face. And Derek has an extraordinary heart. Together, they've changed our lives. They are two kids who deserve just as much love and acceptance as you give your own." Then, slowly, she stepped down from the podium, crossing the divide that felt insurmountable just moments earlier. Each step was guided by a sense of urgency, propelled by the knowing that this was their moment to reclaim their narrative. She could not afford to let ignorance bully them back into the shadows. Warren followed closely, whispering, "Let us take a seat and breathe. It's out there now." He pointed toward the tables filled with curious faces. Yes, she nodded, heading towards Derek, who was still standing by the punch table, his eyes wide with disbelief from what he'd just heard. She crouched down to his level, catching a glimpse of his uncertainty mixed with awe. "You did so well," she whispered, her face straining to smile despite the tears welling in her eyes. Derek grinned, a bashful smirk stretching across his face. "Really? You think so?" "I know so," she affirmed. In that instant, a rush of warmth swelled in Jess's chest, but then, she felt it. The undulating swell of voices behind her, the murmurs rising again like a chorus of suspicion, and a shiver ran down her spine. She turned, her heart sinking at the sight of a small cluster of women with their arms crossed, whispering furiously among themselves. "They'll never get it," Ethan said quietly, his voice just above a whisper. Jess straightened up. "No challenge is ever won by despair," she reminded him, her confidence filling the gaps where doubt lingered. "We are here. We will be heard. Your voice matters." She turned back to address the crowd, suddenly realizing that the child she fought for had made her stronger than ever, but as she stepped forward, someone was making their way through the crowd. A tall figure with an air of familiarity. Jess squinted, the hall lights casting shadows across a face she hadn't expected to see. It was Mrs. Whitmore, the woman whose wealth often acted as a barrier to conversation, known for her sharp tongue and unforgiving opinions. The crowd parted for her, and Jess's heart raced. This was the moment Jess feared most, facing the very judgment that could either shatter their progress or pave the way for new alliances. As Mrs. Whitmore approached, an unease settled like a cloud in the room. The glimmers of hope seemed fragile, teetering on the edge of a cliff. Jess held her breath, an electric pulse radiating through her. What would she say? The anticipation sat heavy. What could the woman who had always scorned the boys possibly offer in this charged moment? Jess felt the weight of every child and every parent who had ever stood on this precipice with her. And then, Mrs. Whitmore spoke. "You all have a right to be here," floated from her lips, but the sincerity of her intent was unreadable. Jess squinted, searching for a hidden intention in those words. She could feel every heartbeat as the crowd shifted, tensions rising again like rising smoke. Would the acceptance promised by rhetoric truly manifest, or was it just a mask for something darker? As silence gripped the room, Jess took a step closer to Mrs. Whitmore, determination coursing through her veins. She would not let this moment slip away. "What do you see when you look at them?" Jess pressed, challenging the very foundation of Mrs. Whitmore's judgment. And without warning, underneath the weight of all those gazes, an unexpected truth began to unfurl. What revelations would surface next? Jess held her breath, hanging on to the silence as the words hung in the air, waiting for Mrs. Whitmore's response. The crowd leaned closer, curiosity woven into every expression, their tension palpable. Jess could feel the gaze of every parent, every child, as they all awaited the answer to her bold question. Mrs. Whitmore's lips pressed into a tight line for a moment that felt like forever. Finally, she exhaled slowly. "I see children like any other," she said, her tone almost softening. "But the world, it doesn't see them that way. It sees barriers." Jess was taken aback. It wasn't quite acceptance, but it wasn't dismissal either. The murmurings within the crowd grew louder. Some looked hopeful, others uncertain. Jess knew that no answer was straightforward, especially not in this charged atmosphere. "Derek and Ethan have so much more potential than what a label can measure," Jess emphasized, her voice steady but passionate. "They are capable of greatness if only given the chance." The deeper Jess dug into her conviction, the more Mrs. Whitmore's demeanor changed. She looked more contemplative than scornful, as if Jess's words were approaching the edges of her well-guarded fortifications. Jessie took a step closer. "It's important to understand that we're all part of this community. We can be the ones to break down these barriers together." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Mrs. Whitmore's features. She hesitated before finally speaking again. What if the path isn't as easy as you think? What if we fail? Failure isn't the end, it's just a step, Jess replied, feeling the warmth of determination flood her being. We learn, we adapt, and we rise. That's the spirit of every parent here. That's parenthood. The crowd stirred, sparked by the hope in her words. Ethan squeezed Jess's hand, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Together, they held their breaths, eager yet anxious, for the next turn of events. You speak as if you believe they could change the world, Mrs. Whitmore said slowly, her tone softer now, tinged with a hint of vulnerability. But can they be understood? Jess smiled, sensing an opening. They may not fit the mold, but that's the beauty of it. They bring a different perspective, unique strengths. We need to embrace those differences, not teach them to hide from the world, she passionately declared, her heart racing as she spoke. Around the room, nods of agreement began to ripple, echoing her sentiment. It was as if a wall was beginning to crack, light seeping through the tiny fissures. Mrs. Whitmore regarded Jess with a mix of curiosity and something softer, perhaps admiration. And what can I do to help, then? She asked, her words measured but hinting at a willingness to engage. Jess's heart soared. This was the moment when the barriers could shatter. You could start by being a voice for change, a voice that helps others understand. Each conversation matters. Your influence could help open doors where they're desperately needed. But before Mrs. Whitmore could respond, one of the cross-armed women stepped forward, her face twisted with disbelief. Just like that, you expect us to believe all of this? What if it leads us to chaos? You can't just say these things and expect change. Jess felt a rush of frustration but quickly replaced it with resolve. It's easy to fear what we don't understand, she said, heart hammering. But change is messy, and it takes courage. Look at our children. They face their fears every day. Let's not rob them of a chance to show their strength. The room went silent again. It was as if everyone was waiting for a decision to be made. Jess maintained eye contact with Mrs. Whitmore, willing her to realize that standing up for what was right was worth the risk. As the low murmurs transformed into a chorus of voices discussing what Jess had ignited, she felt a shift she dared not fully comprehend yet. Hope blossomed, but with it came the fear that change might slip from their grasp. What would Mrs. Whitmore decide? Would she step forward and join this fight, or retreat into her familiar shadows? Jess knew they were on the cusp of something monumental, but she also understood there were no guarantees in the face of fear and opposition. As she glanced at Derek, his face full of eagerness and possibility, she felt the weight of the world resting on her shoulders. In that pivotal moment, she knew their destinies were intertwined, waiting for that one powerful response to an uncertain future. What would happen when Mrs. Whitmore took her next step? Jess felt the room tense up, every eye drawn to Mrs. Whitmore. The weight of the moment pressed around her like thick fog. She could see the gears working in Mrs. Whitmore's mind, uncertainty battling against the comfort of the status quo. Time seemed to stretch as silence filled the air once more. Finally, Mrs. Whitmore inhaled deeply, her posture unsteadily shifting as she squared her shoulders. I've always believed that structure is necessary to guide our children, she began, her voice steady but cautious. But perhaps there is more to this than I've allowed myself to see. A ripple of surprise coursed through the crowd. Jess felt a spark of hope igniting in her chest. Could this be the turning point? Mrs. Whitmore continued, her words tumbling forth like a dam finally giving way. Maybe it's time we explored what embracing differences can truly mean. We've been so focused on what should be that we've lost sight of who our children really are. Encouraged, Jess decided to press further. Yes. We can create programs that celebrate uniqueness rather than suppress it. Workshops, community events. Let's give every child the chance to shine. She could barely contain her excitement, her hands clenching and unclenching by her side, willing the crowd to share in her enthusiasm, but the cross-armed woman spoke once more, her face still twisted into skepticism. And what happens when they struggle? What happens when it doesn't go as planned? The laughter that erupted was loud and unexpected but quickly dimmed as Jess caught sight of Mrs. Whitmore's expression. It was thoughtful but open. "Struggle only means they're learning," Jess rallied, her voice stronger. "We all struggle. It's about finding our way, together." A young father in the audience stepped forward, his face earnest. "I can't speak for everyone, but I want my son to have every opportunity. What if we all started voicing our support? What if we shared our stories and experiences?" Nods of agreement began to resonate throughout the room, gathering momentum. Children who hadn't been heard suddenly felt seen. Derek's hand squeezed Jess's again, this time in excitement, and she could hardly contain her own joy. "Yes!" Jess shouted, inspired by the father's words. "We can become a community that doesn't just tolerate differences, but embraces and celebrates them. It starts here, today." Mrs. Whitmore's lips relaxed into a small smile, and Jess felt a spark of victory course through her. It was a tentative victory, but victory nonetheless. Just as Jess was about to urge the crowd to think about the next steps, the woman with her arms crossed spoke again, but her voice had shifted. "Maybe we need to start listening more, and talking less." A wave of relieved laughter mingled with the air, a signal that barriers were finally beginning to fracture. Yet, just as hope surged anew, a distraction broke the fragile moment. Ethan's voice, loud and clear in the quiet. "Does this mean I can join the soccer team? I want to show everyone I'm good at it." The crowd erupted in chuckles, but Jess felt an ache in her chest. Ethan's eagerness contrasted deeply with the fear of the unknown they had all faced together. "It means you can do anything you set your mind to, buddy," Jess said, kneeling beside him to meet his eyes. "That's exactly what this is about." Mrs. Whitmore finally nodded, seeming to endorse the transition. "I will support these changes," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "Let us think of ways to work together, to create spaces for all our children. They deserve it." A huge cheer erupted from the crowd, lifting the energy to dizzying heights. Jess's heart swelled with pride and relief. It felt as if a bridge had been built right in front of them, a connection forged between fears and possibilities, but as the voices echoed with enthusiasm, a shadow stirred in the corner of the room. A well-dressed man with a familiar silhouette loomed, his eyes carefully observing the scene. Jess couldn't shake the unsettling chill that rolled down her spine. What was his connection to all of this? What secrets lay behind his penetrating gaze? Jess felt the air shift again, tension winding smoothly back into the room. She steeled herself as she prepared to confront whatever came next. The battle was far from over. As the room buzzed with excitement, Jess's heart raced. She tried to focus on the victory they had just achieved, but the man's presence lingered, casting a shadow over the bright moment. She instinctively pulled Derek closer, feeling the need for his strength beside her. "Jess," Derek whispered, his brow furrowed as he caught her eye, "who is that guy?" The question hung heavy, and Jess shook her head slightly, uncertainty creeping in. She couldn't remember ever seeing him before, but his aura felt unmistakable, a kind of authority that made her skin crawl. Mrs. Whitmore seemed to sense the shift in energy, turning her attention to the man whose posture was rigid but still casually confident. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with caution. The man stepped forward, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm here because I wanted to lend my support to this initiative," he said smoothly, his tone rich and deep. "What sort of support?" a voice challenged from the back of the room. Jess felt a wave of solidarity as other parents echoed the same skepticism. The man's smile faltered, but he quickly regrouped. "I own the largest property development firm in town. We've been looking for ways to give back to the community. If you're open to it, I could help create those spaces you've all been discussing." The room fell silent. Jess stared at him, both intrigued and wary. Was this a genuine offer or just a clever ploy? The audience was split, some leaning toward the man's proposal, others regarding him with distrust. Jess could feel the tension knotting in her stomach. And what's in it for you? Another voice interjected, a father who had been shouting his support earlier. How can we trust you? The man's expression hardened for a moment, but then he softened, as if he measured his words carefully. I have a son, he said quietly. He's on the spectrum. I've seen firsthand what it's like to navigate a world that isn't made for kids like him. Jess's heart skipped a beat. Suddenly, the invisible barrier shielding the man's intent began to crack. Was it possible that this stranger, this apparent millionaire, understood their struggles? My son has faced many challenges, just like yours, he continued. I've seen the impact of community support and inclusion, and I want that for him and for all of you. Jess studied his face, searching for sincerity. She saw pain behind his eyes, the kind that resonates deep in the heart. Could he really mean it? Or was it still a facade to mask something darker? Before Jess could voice her thoughts, a young woman in the front row stood up, visibly moved. If you're genuine, then we should hear you out, she said. We need allies, not just skepticism. Every kid deserves a chance. Encouragement blossomed as murmurings of agreement spread through the crowd. Jess felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps they really could untangle this complex web of intentions and start something meaningful. Okay, let us talk, Jess offered, surprising even herself with her boldness. But we need to be open and honest about our goals. The man nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. I promise, I'm here to help. As Jess looked around the room still buzzing with uncertainty but suddenly fierce with possibility, she felt at once excited and terrified. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain, this was a battle worth fighting, but just as the energy shifted back to a hopeful tone, a small voice broke through. Can I still join the soccer team? Ethan chimed in again, his eyes wide and innocent. They all turned to look at him, and Jess couldn't help but smile despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. Yes, Ethan. You can do whatever you dream of. Remember, there are no limits. She assured, her voice ringing with conviction. In that moment, as laughter and cheers erupted once more, Jess wondered if they were truly ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Just what would it mean to accept help from a stranger who shared their struggles? The man scanned the room, sensing the shifting tides of hope and uncertainty. The shadows still loomed, but a spark of connection was igniting. And as Jess wrestled with her thoughts, she couldn't shake the feeling that a deeper bond was forming, a bond that would soon reveal itself in ways she never expected. What secrets would be unveiled as they moved closer together? And what did that mean for all their dreams? The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically as the murmurs of excitement clashed against a backdrop of skepticism. Jess felt like the air was charged, a blend of hope and apprehension swirling around her. It was as if they were standing on the edge of a precipice, and all it took was one small push to send them tumbling into either possibility. Maybe we've just taken the first step, Derek murmured, squeezing Jess's shoulder with warmth and reassurance. She could sense his own hesitation, but the fire of determination was and had always been stronger when they stood together. As the crowd began to regain their energy, Jess glanced at the man one last time. His eyes were lit with a passion she hadn't noticed before, and part of her wished to believe he was sincere. But then, a thought nagged at her, could his presence bring more than just promises? If he was genuine, what sacrifices would he demand in exchange for his aid? Let us discuss what we truly need, Jess said, her voice breaking through the buzzing chatter. If we're going to make this work, we have to be clear about our goals and what we're willing to do. The implication settled over the crowd like a fog, and she could see people looking at one another, weighing their options. Some were invigorated by the potential he offered, while others remained guarded, unsure if they could trust a man who wielded power and money. I'd like to go first, Mrs. Whitmore raised her hand, her gaze steady on the man. If we're going to partner up, we need that honesty we spoke of. What are your conditions? Jess admired Mrs. Whitmore's straightforwardness. It made her heart swell, knowing this was a united front. The man considered her words carefully, his gaze shifting from one person to another before finally settling on her. I have no conditions aside from collaboration. I want to understand your needs. I want to hear your stories, your struggles, he replied, sincerity bleeding through his words. That's where real change begins. Stories? Jess echoed, her heart racing. We have so many stories. But will you listen? Absolutely, he assured her. And they will help shape how we will build together. Derek nudged her gently, a spark igniting in his eyes. This could be our chance, Jess. Our chance to make real progress, to build something that lasts. The thought was intoxicating. Jess could envision the playgrounds, community centers, and inclusive spaces where kids like Ethan could flourish. What if this were real? But just then, doubt crept in again. What if all this hope was being built on shaky ground? A tentative voice piped up, slicing through her thoughts. What if we're just being used? It was a mother who had shared her own difficult experiences with her son's challenges. The room fell quiet again, tension rippling through the air. Jess took a deep breath, her heart racing as she searched for a way to address the disappointment beginning to bloom around her. We deserve allies. If he's willing to listen and learn, maybe that's worth a shot, she said, trying to uphold the optimistic spirit she felt moments ago. Do we even know his name? Another voice chimed in, humorously breaking the tension, and the room erupted in quiet chuckles, a shared coping mechanism against uncertainty. Max, the man interrupted, the corners of his mouth lifting to reveal a genuine smile. Max Richards. I'm Jess, she replied, feeling something shift within her. Maybe they could really forge a partnership. Maybe Max could truly help, but underneath the laughter and shared smiles, Jess felt a flutter in her stomach, an inkling of concern. Could they really trust him? Could collaboration conquer their fears? She looked at Ethan as he bounded over, excitement lighting his face. His innocent joy struck something deeper in Jess. This was about him, all of them, creating a better world. Okay, Jess said, her voice steady. Let us start the conversation. What do you envision, Max? As Max began to answer, the shadows that had once loomed felt a little lighter. But just as hope began to fill the space, a sudden crash echoed from outside, pulling everyone's attention toward the door. What was that? Jess thought, a chill running down her spine. Could it be more than just a coincidence? As a healing bond began to form, was the universe sending a warning, a challenge that would test their newfound resolve? What lay ahead was uncertain, but Jess knew one thing: someone's true character would soon be put to the test. The door swung open forcefully, and a gust of wind rushed into the room, carrying with it an air of unease. Jess squinted into the sudden darkness that threatened to spill in, her heart thudding in her chest. Instinctively, she moved closer to Derek, as if their proximity could shield her from whatever was about to unfold. Did you all hear that? One of the attendees whispered, eyes wide with concern. Max stood tall at the front, his expression shifting rapidly between curiosity and concern. Let me check, he said, stepping away from the makeshift circle they had created and moving towards the door. Jess watched him go, a knot tightening in her stomach. What could have caused that sound? Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it someone trying to disrupt their meeting? Or were someone threatening the fragile connection they were trying to build? Just then, a figure appeared outside, a disheveled man with an anxious look in his eyes. He stepped into the light, revealing a harried expression and clothes that seemed slightly out of place. Please, I need to talk. It's important, he said, his voice trembling. Who are you? Max asked, returning to the group, his protective demeanor resurfacing. My name is Frank. I live around the corner. I saw something I shouldn't have. The man's breaths came quick, as if he had just run a marathon. The room fell silent, every eye trained on him. What did you see? Jess asked, instinct taking over. The weight of the moment felt heavy, the tension coiling around them. "There are people watching this group," Frank stammered. "I wasn't supposed to be there, but I overheard them talking. They don't want you to succeed. They think you're threatening their business or something." Derek shook his head, his disbelief palpable. "That doesn't make any sense. We're just a community trying to make a difference." "I know how it sounds. But that's what they said. They plan to sabotage any efforts you make. To make sure your children never get the playgrounds, the centers," he explained, desperation lacing his voice. Jess felt her heart sink. Could there be someone out there, actively trying to undermine their possibilities? "Why are you telling us this?" she asked, her voice steady, though her insides churned. "Because I don't want to see anyone suffer like I did," Frank replied, his eyes darting nervously. "I have a son he's like those kids. I know what it's like to feel helpless." The room was silent again. Jess could feel the weight of Frank's words lingering in the air, intertwining with her own feelings of hope and uncertainty. Could their fight for something better be threatened by unseen forces? Could they have a chance of achieving their dreams in the face of such opposition? "Okay," Max said, breaking the silence. "Then we fight back. We won't let anyone take this chance from us." "Jess, what do we need to do?" Jess met his gaze, and for the first time, a spark of resolution ignited in her chest. "We need a plan. We have to rally the community and let them know what's happening. We need allies who'll fight to protect our vision together." "Are you sure?" Derek asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "What if it becomes dangerous?" Jess nodded firmly, determined. "We owe it to our kids. We owe it to Ethan." Her voice rose with passion, filling the room. There was a roar of agreement, a stirring of camaraderie that made her heart flutter with hope. As they began to strategize, Jess stole a glance at Ethan, who watched them with bright, wide eyes filled with innocence and determination. Her soul surged with purpose. But just as they moved forward, a sound echoed again, a distant crash, louder this time, the unmistakable sound of chaos. Jess froze, fear gripping her. What now? She wondered. Would they face another threat, or was a new chapter in their fight starting to unfold? Something was changing in this battle. And as uncertainty loomed overhead, Jess could feel the urgency of their situation all around them. What lay ahead felt volatile, a fragile balance hanging by a thread. Would their collective strength be enough to conquer the tides of adversity? The crash echoed once more, sending tremors through Jess's resolve. She turned sharply to face the door, expecting something to burst through at any moment. The unease in the room deepened as whispers threaded through the group, their earlier energy faltering under the weight of fear. "Stay close," Derek murmured, moving protectively beside her. His hand brushed against her arm, a silent vow that they would face this together. Max raised his voice above the murmurs. "Everyone, focus. We need to stay calm and think." His authoritative tone cut through the rising panic, bringing some semblance of order. "Frank, do you have any idea where those people are coming from?" "They were in the abandoned warehouse across the street," Frank replied, visibly shaking. "I'm not sure what they plan to do, but I could see shadows moving behind the windows." It felt wrong. A rush of adrenaline surged through Jess. "Then we need to act fast. We can't just sit here and hope nothing happens." She glanced at Ethan, who was still watching with wide eyes, unaware of the fear brewing around them. That innocent gaze ignited a fire in her. They couldn't fail him. "What's the plan?" someone asked, breaking the tension of silence that had taken hold. Max gestured for everyone to come closer. "Jess has a point. We can't wait for them to make a move. We'll organize a watch. A few of us can stay here while others gather as many people as we can to help us." "Is that wise?" Derek interjected, his worry evident. "What if they confront us? We can't let fear dictate our actions." Jess countered, feeling the weight of the moment pushing her forward. If we gather our community, they can't silence us. We have strength in numbers. They nodded in agreement, slowly standing taller, gathering confidence from her words. As they began to brainstorm who would go where, Jess felt the whirlwind of emotions swirl within her. Yes, they were facing threats, but that very danger had sparked a unity she hadn't felt before. Their hopes intertwined, forming a bond stronger than any dismal shadow lurking outside. Let us spread the word, and we need to show them that this group means business. Max declared, rallying their spirits. Jess, can you handle communications? I can. I'll get on social media, make calls, anything to gather support. A warmth blossomed in her chest, she felt the swell of purpose once again. Each face around her reflected determination, as if they were all linked in that moment, fighting for more than just a playground. They were fighting for a future. Suddenly, another noise pierced the air, the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. The group slid into silence, hearts clenching, eyes darting toward the source. Jess's stomach dropped. Adrenaline pulsed through her veins. She could hardly think. What was that? Frank whispered, panic dancing on his face. It's them. Derek said, fear evident in his voice. They're getting closer. Max's expression hardened. We'll have to fortify our positions. Jess, you stay with Ethan. The others take your cues on strategy. Jess nodded, her voice trembling slightly. We won't let them see us back down. Ethan's small hand slipped into hers, his calm presence oddly grounding. Jess squeezed his hand, knowing this was a fight not just for support but for his safety as well. They wouldn't be afraid. Just as they leaned into their roles, a loud thud reverberated through the hall. The door rattled violently as if something was trying to force its way in. Get back! Max shouted, positioning himself in front of Jess and Ethan. The air snapped with tension as they braced for what would come next. Would they face the danger head-on, or would this mark the moment they realized just how far they were willing to go in the fight for their future? Would their newfound courage hold against what waited just beyond the threshold? The room held its breath, a taut wire ready to snap. Jess felt the weight of the moment like a stone in her chest. Beside her, Ethan squeezed her hand tighter, his eyes wide, reflecting a mix of courage and fear. Everyone stay calm. Max's voice boomed again, rallying the group as shadows danced at the edge of their vision. The thud sounded again, more insistent now, shaking the door's frame. Jess's heart was pounding, each beat echoing the resolve building inside her. They had come so far. Fear would not take away their progress. Then, with an explosive crash, the door burst open, splintering wood flying into the room. A group of men stepped through, faces hard and menacing. Jess instinctively shielded Ethan behind her, her mind racing. What did they want? Frank stepped forward, shaking but defiant. You're not going to intimidate us. We will fight for our families. The courage in his voice struck a chord. It was a united front, standing strong against the incoming storm. Fight for what? You think a couple of special needs kids deserve to take our resources? A man snarled, folding his arms across his chest like an iron barrier. Jess's thoughts raced back to the judgments she'd faced, the whispers that had haunted her. This was a battle not just for their children, but for their place in this community. Every child deserves a chance at happiness. Jess stepped forward, her voice clenched and resolute. You're blinded by your fears. They are our future. We are not backing down. We are here to change the world for those kids. A low murmur swept through the crowd behind her, voices whispering in agreement, the energy shifting from fear to fierceness. It was a tangible change. Jess saw doubt flickering in some of the aggressor's eyes. What do you think you can do? One challenged, trying to restore authority, but Jess sensed the tide turning. We are not going to quit. You can try to break us, but look around. We'll keep standing together. The men hesitated, uncertainty creeping into their hardened expressions. Jess glanced at Max, who nodded, silently urging her onward. She felt a spark of hope surge through her. They see barriers, but we see potential. She shouted. You are looking at them through a lens of prejudice, but these kids are not less, they're more. She pointed to Ethan and Derek, who stood resolute, their young faces set with determination. They have so much to offer. We are a community that must rally together, not tear apart. If you want to fight against us, you'll have a fight on your hands. And together, we are stronger. Together, came a voice from behind her. Then another. One by one, parents and friends stepped forward, standing tall beside her. The crowd tightened around, that unshakable unity forming a shield against the shadows looming at the door. What you're doing is wrong. A new voice took hold, this time from another brave parent stepping forth. Our kids deserve to take part in life. They deserve equal standing. Society is better when everyone contributes. In that moment, she saw it. The men before them faltered, glances exchanged among them, whispers shared. They were not just intimidating figures anymore, they were faced with a collective courage forged in love and resilience. Back down. Just leave us alone. Another parent called out, igniting the fire in their hearts all over again. The group thrummed with energy, voices rising. The leader of the intruders huffed, stepping back slightly, unease starting to wring his nerves. You can't win this, he sneered, though his voice lacked conviction. Watch us. Jess shot back, her heart racing with conviction as the crowd roared in support. She turned to Max, emboldened. This is our stand. If we stay strong together, we'll build the future for our kids. Yeah. Came enthusiastic shouts from all corners of the room. The energy pulsed through them, each voice echoing the strength echoing at their backs. Finally, the men exchanged uncertain glances before backing toward the door. This isn't over, the leader spat, though his tone lacked the previous confidence. Crumbling under the weight of their unity. Then let us make sure you hear us loud and clear. Jess shouted as they withdrew, fists raised, a chorus of cheers punctuating their retreat, and just like that, the storm subsided. Jess stood there, breathless, her heart swelling with a fierce kind of joy. Together, they had forged this victory standing united. She turned to Ethan, who beamed up at her, eyes shining with pride. Did you see that, Mom? We did it. He exclaimed, exuding the self-assurance she had longed to see in him. Yes, we did. Jess knelt beside him, tears of joy brimming in her eyes. The world felt different now, a canvas waiting to be painted anew. They would fight together, face challenges head-on, and build a community that embraced every child, regardless of their differences. As Jess looked around, it was clear this was just the beginning. They would create spaces for kids like Ethan and Derek, a place where differences were celebrated and acceptance flourished. Their fight had transformed from a whisper of hope into a powerful movement, one that no one could silence. In that moment, Jess felt unstoppable. The shadows might still linger, but they would never allow them to dim their light again. All right, everyone. Max called out, gathering the parents and kids together. It's time we get to work on those plans for our community. Let us start spreading the good news. With laughter and encouragement around her, Jess felt a wave of overwhelming gratitude. They had found strength in each other, and now, they were ready to take on the world. Support looks like this, Jess smiled, embracing the warmth of the community. Together, they had shattered fear and reclaimed their narrative, forging a path toward acceptance and understanding, and as they chattered and planned, Jess felt the rhythm of hope thrumming in every heartbeat around her. This was what it meant to fight for love. This was just the beginning of their story. Don't let this moment pass. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your thoughts on this inspiring transformation, and let us know how you feel. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this change. You need to show your support now. Let us spread hope together.